Behind the mask and the costume, it wasn't all laughs. Despite being a somewhat popular figure, there's something very few people know about the life of a court jester. But today, by the end of this video, you'll be one of the few who truly understand the chilling reality behind the life of a jester in the Middle Ages. With their colorful and extravagant outfits, jesters were a familiar presence in medieval courts, valued for their honesty and sharp sense of humor. Interestingly, the variety of names used for jesters in different languages shows just how widespread and influential they were, not just in Europe, but beyond. The word jester itself comes from a 16th century Anglo-Germanic term, derived from Hester, meaning storyteller. From battlefield comedians to unfortunate messengers, jesters played many roles in royal courts throughout the medieval era. But what was life really like for these characters, whose job wasn't just to entertain and make people laugh, but also to make the court and royalty reflect on deeper truths? In this video, we'll uncover what the real living conditions of royal jesters were, and explore the fascinating and often dark history behind them. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Jesters were often associated with the devil. Christian writers saw them as sinful and corrupt, frequently linking them to demonic influences. In the 18th century, the theologian Guglielmus launched a furious diatribe against professional jesters, condemning their ability to make men laugh, a skill he considered dangerous and sinful. He even compared it to the mocking behavior of goats and apes, which, in his view, incited humans to scorn. Christians were especially repulsed by the jesters' servile attitude in exchange for the coin purses of wealthy patrons. They believed that being rewarded for jesting was an immoral way to live. They also strongly opposed dancing, viewing it as a tool created by the devil to tempt men into darkness. By the 18th century, it was commonly believed that the devil himself was the originator of all dance. Number 2. Some jesters were people with physical deformities. In medieval times, the rich and powerful had an almost obsessive fascination with deformities, so much so that they often sought them out in their jesters. In fact, the oldest known court jester, dating back to around 2300 BC, was a talented dwarf who gained the favor of Pharaoh Neferkare. A letter from the time reads, "You have said in your letter that you have brought a dancing dwarf from the land of spirits. Come north to the court immediately. Bring this dwarf with you to perform the dances of the god, to delight and gladden the heart of the king." Since ancient times, disability, particularly dwarfism, was seen as a valued trait in jesters, reaching its peak expression in the courts of medieval Europe. One example is Sir Geoffrey Hudson, the beloved dwarf jester of Queen Henrietta Maria of England. He was often sent on errands and even earned a place beside her in a royal portrait. Number 3. Sometimes the fascination with dwarfs hid something much darker. The interest in jesters wasn't always innocent. It often bordered on fetishism, leading to a disturbing and cruel practice: the deliberate stunting of children's growth in an attempt to create so-called artificial dwarves. In 17th century Italy and Spain, there were so-called buy-boy traders who made their living by kidnapping or purchasing children and then deforming them. They would apply concoctions made from bat fat, moles, and mice to a baby's spine, then prescribe dwarf elder, snail herb, daisy juice, and root extracts mixed with milk to further stunt the child's development. This obsession with disability wasn't limited to Europe. It appeared in many societies across the world. Among the Aztecs, jesters were almost always physically deformed and were common figures in the court of Emperor Montezuma II, according to Spanish conquistadors. In Turkey, under Ottoman Emperor Suleiman the Magnificent, the most highly prized court jesters were deaf and mute dwarfs. The French traveler Tournefort once wrote, "When a dwarf is born deaf, and therefore mute, he is considered the phoenix of the palace, more admired than the most handsome man in the world, especially if he is a eunuch." Rulers favored dwarfs not only because of their physical uniqueness, but also because their imperfections gave them license to joke about the flaws of the monarch himself. Adopting a dwarf into the royal household was often seen as an act of charity. Allowing a marginalized and unfortunate creature to enter the palace made nobles appear compassionate and merciful in the eyes of their subjects and fellow aristocrats. Number 4. The hiring process was surprisingly merit-based. Unlike most professions in the Middle Ages, becoming a court jester was one of the few roles based on merit, rather than lineage or wealth. What made the hiring process particularly unique was its informality and a touch of luck. Nobles often encountered potential jesters during their travels outside the castle walls. If someone made a noble laugh, whether intentionally or by accident, there was a good chance they'd be brought back to the court. In many ways, it was a job one could stumble into simply by being funny at the right place and time. Number 5. Talent mattered more than background. In contrast to most medieval careers, court jesters could come from virtually any background. Their social standing, family name, or wealth didn't matter. The only thing that did was how funny they were. Much like modern-day comedians who start off performing in small clubs or on the streets, someone with a sharp wit or natural comedic talent could be noticed by a passing noble and quickly rise to the highest levels of royal entertainment. For jesters, humor was the great equalizer. Number 6. There was no clear gender barrier in the profession. Interestingly, jesters weren't judged by their gender. Several female jesters, known as foolisses or jestresses, shared the same responsibilities, privileges, and stage as their male counterparts, and many found success in European courts. One of the most praised was Maturin the Madwoman, who served with distinction in the courts of Henry III, Henry IV, and Louis XIII during the 17th century. On one occasion, a noblewoman complained about having to sit next to a jester. Maturin quickly moved to the other side of the lady and quipped, "That's fine. I don't mind either." Her quick wit earned her great admiration. Number 7. Musical talent helped them stand out. Skilled jesters were often talented musicians, and it was their musical abilities that frequently opened the doors to royal courts. One famous example is the German jester Frederick Taffmann, who so impressed a bishop with his musical performance that he was described as the second Orpheus, a reference to the legendary musician of ancient Greece. In many cases, music wasn't just entertainment, it was a ticket into the royal circle. Number 8. Jesters were also expected to know poetry. Beyond music, jesters were often well-versed in poetry, verse, and storytelling. In fact, a solid command of language and composition was part of their expected skill set. One famous example was the French court poet Andrelini, known as much for his literary talent as for his unusual appearance. He was chosen as the first official poet of King Louis XII's court. Similarly, in India, the jester Birbal became a close confidant of Emperor Akbar the Great. His masterful storytelling and poetic skills earned him the honorary title of Poet Laureate. Number 9. Jesters also served on the battlefield. Their talents weren't limited to the palace. Jesters were expected to accompany their lords into battle, using music and verse to entertain and calm the troops before a fight. For instance, in 1066, Taillefer, the jester of William the Conqueror, sang heroic songs about Charlemagne and Roland to rally the troops before battle. Jesters also played a psychological role, taunting enemy soldiers with clever insults, hoping to provoke them into breaking formation, which could turn the tide in favor of their side. But life on the battlefield was dangerous. Sometimes jesters were sent to deliver messages to the enemy mid-conflict, missions that often ended in disaster. If the message wasn't well received, the enemy might respond with gruesome theatrics, like catapulting the jester's severed head or body back to camp as a horrifying warning. Number 10. They were admired for their honesty. While court jesters were celebrated for their comedic and artistic talents, they were also deeply respected for something far more rare in royal courts: their honesty. In a world where the king's word was law, jesters held a unique and privileged position. They were often the only ones allowed to mock or even advise the monarch within certain limits. Their boldness was not just tolerated, it was valued. Many rulers saw them as trusted confidants and granted them a surprising degree of intellectual freedom. In Norway, for example, King Harald I was known for keeping a group of skalds, a type of Scandinavian jester poet, with whom he would regularly discuss matters of the empire. Unlike other courtiers who showered the king with flattery, these skalds were known for maintaining their independence of thought. Their frankness and composure earned them not just the king's attention, but his respect. Number 11. Being a jester also came with real risks. To the enemies of their master, a jester was nothing more than a disposable servant. That meant jesters were often caught in dangerous and uncomfortable positions, at the mercy of external threats beyond their control. Their loyalty to a noble or royal figure could put them in harm's way, especially during times of political tension or war. Number 12. Sometimes they worked as household servants. While performance was a major part of their role, court jesters were also expected to fulfill other duties as part of their service. They answered directly to the nobles or kings who owned the estates where they lived. On any given day, a jester might be asked to run household errands, care for pets or livestock, keep track of food and supplies, or deliver letters and messages. Historical records suggest that multi-talented jesters earned significantly more than those with only one skill, sometimes twice as much. So despite the colorful costumes and occasional laughter, their lives were far from easy. And while there are some parallels to modern-day comedians or performers, jesters lived under the constant demands of the court and were always expected to put on a good show. Number 13. Only a few jesters truly stood out and became famous. English kings like Edward II and Edward III had a long succession of jesters, and they all went by the same name, Robert. Their real names didn't matter to the crown, but by the 13th century, some jesters began to rise above the crowd and achieve a kind of celebrity status. Those fortunate enough to be employed by royalty were given impressive perks, their own horse, personal servants, and generous pay. One such jester, known as Tom the Fool, performed at the wedding banquet of King Edward I's daughter and was paid 50 shillings, a massive sum at the time. To put that in perspective, a skilled weaver might earn just 2.5 pence a day, and you could buy a goose for 1.5 pennies. For a jester, this was the big leagues. Number 14. There were 3 types of jesters. As the Middle Ages progressed, jesters began to fall into 3 distinct categories. The first was the classic professional jester, usually clever, well-educated, and often dressed in normal court attire, just like their noble masters. Unlike the more flamboyant jesters in costume, these individuals blended in with the elite, offering sharp wit and insightful commentary rather than slapstick. Number 15. Some jesters were taken in out of charity. Wealthy or noble families sometimes adopted men and women with mental illnesses or physical deformities, as we've mentioned earlier. This was the second type of jester, people with disabilities who were kept almost like pets, either for entertainment or as a Christian act of charity. They were often referred to as innocent fools, and were sometimes given titles like the Queen's Fool or the Lord's Fool. They weren't paid for their role, just given food, clothing, and a place to sleep, often on the floor. If the noble family grew tired of them, they might be granted a small pension in the form of regular alms. Sadly, many of these poor souls ended up living out their final days as beggars. Number 16. The most recognizable were the costumed jesters. The third type of jester were the members of so-called fool societies, especially popular in France. These were groups of amateur performers who appeared during Christmas, at fairs, and in festivals. They usually wore the classic jester outfit, with a hood, floppy ears, and brightly colored robes. Small bells were often attached to their shoes or clothing, and they would dance and leap through the streets. Some even carried babies on their backs while performing. Number 17. Some were fiercely loyal to royalty. During the Elizabethan era, court jesters began to shift from performing in noble households to becoming comedic actors on stage. By the 17th century, having royal patronage could be quite risky, as discovered by Geoffrey Hudson, a talented dwarf jester. He was discovered by King Charles I after dramatically popping out from inside a pie crust. Geoffrey later fled with Queen Henrietta Maria to the Netherlands and returned with her to England, where he fought on horseback for the Royalists during the English Civil War. Despite his small stature, he was a skilled rider and soldier. His unwavering loyalty to the crown helped ensure the Queen's safe passage back to France. Number 18. Loyalty didn't change their low social status. A few months after escorting the Queen out of the country, Geoffrey was insulted by the brother of Lord Croft, the captain of the Queen's Guard. The insult was about his height. Outraged, Geoffrey challenged the man to a duel and shot him dead. As a result, the Queen had no choice but to banish him. On his way into exile, Geoffrey was captured by pirates and sold into slavery. Strangely, when he eventually returned to England, he had grown about a foot taller. In yet another twist, he was later accused of being involved in the Popish plot of 1679. He was eventually released from prison in 1682 at the age of 63, but died not long after. Number 19. They were applauded by the underdogs. The jester was often seen as a champion of the common people, someone who cleverly stood up to the powerful. By outwitting the elite with sharp wit and humor, the jester earned the admiration of the masses. He was the everyman who dared to mock authority when no one else could. However, jesters were not rebels or revolutionaries. Their unique position allowed them to side with the oppressed and challenge the system's excesses, without ever seeking to overthrow it. Their purpose wasn't to replace one system with another, but to hold a mirror to society and expose its flaws. Number 20. In Russia, jesters played a moral role. In Russia, jesters had a unique purpose: to reveal human flaws and immoral behavior through entertaining performances that resembled fables or allegories. They were sometimes viewed almost like holy figures, and surprisingly, their words often had a deeper impact than formal sermons. Among them were educated and insightful individuals, nobles and aristocrats included, who could openly engage with the king in philosophical, political, or theological discussions. These jesters weren't mere entertainers, they were moral commentators in disguise.